Hello and welcome to One Week, One Year, a podcast where we watch and discuss every year of film history in order, starting in 1895, the dawn of cinema. And this episode is 1945. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Ellie. I'm a film projectionist, and joining me as always, across the table from me even,
Whoa.
who we got over here?
I'm Glenn Covell. I'm a filmmaker.
Yes.
Between the two of us, we know about how movies get made and how they get shown, I guess. That's our gimmick.
That I feel like we've got the very beginning of our podcast down, but not like as soon as we introduce ourselves,
That's
we're
the
like,
hard.
what do we do?
I think that's the hardest part. I see that even amongst the pros. They're like, we have our scripted intro, we have the thing we do every time, and then immediately they're like, I don't know how to talk.
Yeah. Well, how's it going, Glenn?
It's going well. We're both in the same room for once.
Yes.
That's fun.
You're a filmmaker and an apartment renter.
Correct.
The one that we're in.
Yeah, on your camera, you get a nice view of my kitchen.
Yeah, I'm in town for a couple days. Saw a concert. We watched Sinners in IMAX.
Good. Big
IMAX
recommend.
70mm. Thought we'd record a little old podcast,
Yeah, a little old podcast.
Why don't we we got that down. Why don't we I wonder what happened in 1945.
Yeah, I don't know, not a lot going
Like
on.
we gotta give ourselves a little understanding of what's going on, the cultural
What happened that year?
context of where these movies are being made. Yeah, what happened? What happened in 1945? Glenn, why don't you tell us? Read us the news.
The news of the year, 1945. U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt dies of a cerebral hemorrhage, leading Vice President Harry Truman to take the reins. Allied victory in Europe. Germany surrenders following the suicide of Adolf Hitler and Russia's invasion of Berlin. Winston Churchill resigns as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Japan surrenders following the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. World War II is over. The Viet Minh take the Vietnamese capital of Hanoi, splitting the country between North and South. The United Nations is established. The Nuremberg trials for Nazi war crimes begin.
A lot of cheery news for 1945.
In a way, I mean,
Important news. I mean, World War II end. That's good. Good news.
Certainly some gruesome stuff happened at the end of World War II.
Oh yeah.
But it's good that it's over.
Yeah.
It's we don't have to have this awkwardness anymore of doing a gimmick while talking about
Very
horrors.
true. I mean, it's not like the horrors of the world ended in 1945, but yeah, it was definitely rough just to like
horrors were over.
Reading news in a silly voice has been less fun than normal the last couple episodes. So
now the Nazis are over and they will never come back, and there's no trace of the Nazis anymore. We can we can stop being feeling awkward about all of that. At least for now. And that sailor kissed that lady, right?
Yeah.
Even though apparently she didn't know him, and then she didn't feel very good about that.
Yeah. Sailors don't kiss ladies in the street unless they consent to it.
Yeah, unless they consent to creating an iconic photo.
Yeah,
about the end.
That was her problem with it. Was
yeah.
No one said you could take an iconic photo of me.
Yeah, I did want to kiss him. I didn't want to take an iconic photo celebrating the end of World War II.
A boring photo, fine, but iconic, no thank you.
Yeah. Well, speaking of World War II, we have a doozy, a film highly related to horrors, aforementioned horrors.
Yeah, no kidding.
This is a film called Nazi Concentration Camps or Nazi Concentration and Prison Camps, which is directed by George Stevens of Shane fame.
Right. We haven't really, because he was a director in Hollywood before World War II, but I don't think we covered any of his movies on the show.
I think we might have.
Did we? I mean, he did, I think, Swing Time, which we did not watch.
Oh, maybe that's it. I saw Swing Time, but we didn't watch the show. Yeah.
But he was one of a few directors that, joined up the war effort, making propaganda / documentary, wartime pictures, whilst in lots of dangerous situations. And yeah, George Stevens was not one of the first people, but he went to the Dachau concentration camp, I think a couple of days after it was initially liberated,
Mm.
and was kind of there, I guess, as like a documentarian, but he sort of had a realization just of sort of how horrific this was, and he sort of switched, I guess, his approach in sort of how he was documenting things, and so it's less of like a documentary and more of a like compilation of evidence. At least
Right.
that was sort of like the intent behind it. Was George Stevens was like, someone's got to pay for this, and so I want to document this less so as a sort of like for newsreels and that sort of thing, and more as, yeah,
Yeah.
like evidence to be used against the Nazis.
And in fact, this movie begins almost as if like
Yeah,
this is evidence
this
because
is it's really more
yeah,
of a court document than a movie.
right. Though it's interesting. So the movie begins with these kind of like signed declarations,
Affidavits.
affidavits at the beginning
Yeah.
saying like I, George Stevens, I, John Ford, I, whoever else from the military, like verify that this is accurate and true
Yeah.
and like admissible in a court of law,
Right.
basically.
Like it hasn't been tampered with. It's like this is raw footage from the camera. Like we're
Yeah.
not doing anything to it. This is evidence. Yeah.
Yeah, which like, it's and part of it also, which I think is interesting, like metatextually in terms of like the idea of a documentary is
Mm.
like it is saying there is no, there's no agenda in this footage. There's no like we've it says we've captured 80,000 feet of footage and there's 6,000 feet and like we're swearing that this 6,000 feet is representative
Right.
of the 80,000
Yeah.
feet, which I think is really interesting because it's like grappling with the kind of fundamental
Yeah.
trickery of selecting footage,
Yeah.
right? I, not to say to be fair to the Nazis, but this move this
You do not got to hand it to them.
but this is rather plain, right? A rather
Mhm.
plain depiction, but it is also just like a like there is some persuasion I think that's built
Sure.
into this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's pretty hard to like completely remove footage of concentration camps like from emotion.
Right.
Like it's, anything that's this horrific is like, even the act of documenting it is going to come with some amount of uh intent behind it. I did think about that while watching it because there's so much like upfront about like this is like
Yeah.
we're not this has no agenda,
Like I
right?
wouldn't
And
have
it's like,
thought that if it didn't say like this is
right.
completely,
But I do
impartial.
think it I mean, from what I know about the greater historical context of it, it is fairly free of like sort of direct editorializing and that sort of, I mean, it's like it's one of the things, I mean, it's incredibly upsetting to watch. I would
Yes.
say if you're listening to this and you have any doubt whatsoever, if you want to watch this, do not, because it is just, it's just horrors the whole time. It's just like very plain.
I
At
mean,
times
I
I
do think that people should watch this though,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
like it's not like, I mean, that's not true, but like, it's not true that there are, I was about to say like people don't know about the horrors of the Nazis. They do. Like
I mean, some
but
people
like some people
need
don't, right?
an education,
But
clearly,
that's
but
the thing.
yeah.
It's like, like this movie, I think, is quite effective in its goals, really,
Yeah.
of just like confronting you directly with
Mhm.
the inhumanity of their
Yeah,
actions.
and the scope of it too.
Yes, the
I
scope
because
for
I think
sure.
early on it shows a map of all of the major concentration camps. Not even all of the like main
And it's
ones,
so big.
and there's so many. And then the actual footage only covers, I think, about 5.
It's more like 10 or something.
Right, but
Yeah.
it's nowhere
Yeah.
near exhaustive, and it's like just seeing the same type of horrific imagery repeated in all these different places, and knowing that that is only s- like like a
Like a
sliver
piece of a
of,
piece.
right, and
Yeah.
it's like the scale and the magnitude of it is like mind-boggling.
But even, the scale that you see in the movie
Yeah,
is
that's
horrific.
yeah.
Horrific.
And I think that's one of the things that is most horrific about it is just like the amount of corpses that are being like piled, moved around, like thrown together. It is like it becomes abstract to a certain degree,
Yeah.
and that
I
is
think that
really
crucially though,
horrible too.
it, like, is still human. It's still human scale, right?
Yeah.
Like, you show the map and you're like, "This is happening all over the place," but it's very easy to hear statistics about World War II, and you're just like,
Hmm.
6 million Jews died, you know? And then
Yeah.
you're like, "That's a number," right? But then, like, you are seeing the actual people, like, who are just, like, skin and bones, like, barely surviving coming out of these camps, or you see these bodies that look almost alien in terms of
Yeah.
like how destroyed they are from the human form just based on the horrific treatment that they
Yeah.
got, you know. It like, and then you look at all these people and you're like, there's a pile of bodies in front of me that barely resemble human beings anymore, but they were all individual people, right? Like, it's, you know, it's not a novel take of like, you know, World War II was
Yeah.
horrific and the Holocaust was horrific, but I think that this film does a really good job of really just putting that right in your face.
Yeah. I think one thing that is kind of upsetting about it is the fact that it isn't artfully shot. It isn't like it's never pretty. It's just very plain. And
Yes.
that in and of itself is like upsetting.
Yeah. It
Um,
makes it feel like a truer document for
that,
sure.
but also just like there's a kind of remove from it where it's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, it's just but I think that that kind of like kind of slight clinical quality does because it there's there's such inherent kind of emotion in it, and
Yeah.
yet there's no emotion being uh, portrayed through the camera or the editing or like none of that.
Yeah.
Like it feels kind of like it's like watching like raw footage for parts of it. I mean,
Mhm.
it's almost entirely without sync sound. I think there's one brief kind of
Like a speech.
there's like an interview. There's
Oh, yeah,
like a
yeah.
testimonial almost, but otherwise it's just narration over like silent. You just hear like the scratching of like the film recording kind of.
Mhm.
And I mean, there's nothing in this movie that is that I hadn't seen before,
Right.
but I think just having so much like it's just a solid hour of just like awful horrific imagery.
Yeah.
And I feel like I don't know, I think I'm pretty good at like stomaching looking at awful things, and yet like at a certain point in this movie I kind of had to like look away from it because it
Mm.
was just like just the amount of it.
Yeah.
I've seen so many corpses in the last 40 minutes. I don't want to see another one.
Yeah, yeah. When I was watching this movie, like, my mouth was, like, open the entire time. Like, you know, it was again, like, you know, I've also seen a lot of this style of footage or maybe some of this
Yeah.
footage itself already, but, like, seeing it all together, it is, like, a real feeling of horror
Yeah.
that you're
Also,
experiencing.
like I can watch the most like horrendously like gruesome shit if it is like fictionalized,
Yeah.
even lightly, because
As in, like, documentary footage that is.
no, but anytime something is like you're looking at like a real corpse or like
Yeah.
real whatever, like medical procedure, whatever it
Mhm.
might be, it always hits me a lot harder.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And so even though like I love a gruesome horror movie, like it's so different to watch like actual suffering
I
and
I mean, I think this underscores how different it is,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like how movie violence is really just nothing like real violence.
right, absolutely. I think even like watching, Schindler's List is a very upsetting movie, but there is that level of kind of remove from it that it is, in the back of your head that it's being staged. And so just to see like documentary footage is always there's always just like it feels more like visceral to me anyway.
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
it's yeah. Like I feel like I don't often have as much of a like gut, like almost involuntary reaction to seeing anything the
Right.
way that I do to like watching something like this.
Yeah, like I'm not like watching a fiction movie like with like my mouth hanging open and just like in abject horror
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
entire time. I was talking to Alan, who was on our 1937 episode about this, and how me and him, when we were 15, we made a trip to Washington, D.C., and we went to the Holocaust Museum. And uh, I wasn't when we went to that museum, we were talking about our memories from that museum,
Hmm.
and one of the ones for me was that I was not certain. I couldn't remember truly, but like I was not certain that I had never seen, like, my impression was that I had never seen a depiction of a true dead body before. Like,
Hmm.
I've seen dead bodies in movies, obviously, but like I think when I was 14, 15, whenever that was, like I wasn't certain I'd ever really seen like a picture of an actual corpse
Hmm.
before. But I remember making the choice. In fact, in the Holocaust Museum, they have, it's got, of course, it's full of horrors, but they had this section that was like behind a wall where you could kind of, it was like you can peer over this wall if you are making the
Oof.
choice to look
Yeah.
at the most gruesome stuff that you possibly can. And I remember being 15 and going like, I think I need to look over this wall.
Hmm.
Like I think I need to confront this stuff directly because like this is what I'm here for. This is something that it's a horrible thing that everyone has to experience at some
Hmm.
point is watching something like this movie. And Alan was talking about how an image that he remembered very clearly on those screens was of a bulldozer pushing a pile of human bodies
Yeah.
into a pit. And it was in the end of this movie. It was the same footage, I
Yeah.
think, from the end of this movie that he'd seen, and that was like the image that stuck with him.
One of the points where like I had to look away from it
Hmm.
because it's like, yeah, I don't know, it's rare to be confronted with something that is like too awful to like look at for
Right.
more than like a couple of seconds.
Yeah. So yeah, this movie,
So yeah, this movie was not for like public consumption, really. Like
right.
probably parts of this ended up in newsreels, but I mean one of the things we're looking at in the news segment was how like uh newsreels of concentration camps was like theaters would refuse to show it because it was too graphic.
Yeah, which is why I was saying like I feel like this is a movie that like people need to
Hmm.
see.
I think there are probably like other documentaries and things that use a lot of the same footage that maybe I don't know are a little easier to watch. I think because this is so kind of like plain and
It shouldn't be easier to
I
watch.
mean, yeah, I guess that's a fair point. But yeah, it's right. It because it's like it's unvarnished. It's just like staring directly into the abyss.
Yeah. The abyss of like human behavior.
Yeah.
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 Like you were saying, this movie kind of covers a number of different concentration camps, and like it kind of highlights a unique aspect of each one as it goes through them. So like, there's a lot of similar stuff going on, but it's like, yeah, this one, like we treated them this way. At this one, they were gassed in this way. And so it also kind of leads you to think about like the variety of horrors that
Hmm.
they inflict.
Well, that's like kind of part of why this like document exists also is
Mhm.
to like have hard evidence of like here are all of the methods of murder that were being employed. So like, it doesn't really feel exhaustive in terms of like the enormity of like what the Holocaust was, but it does there's real effort being put into it of trying to kind of capture all of the different crimes.
Yeah.
We want to get as many crimes on camera or like the evidence of those crimes on camera as
Right.
possible.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. It is evidence for sure.
Yeah.
Another thought was like, how could anybody deny the existence of the Holocaust when they see this movie,
Right. I
right?
mean, a question I have always had of just like, what are you talking about?
This happened pretty recently.
Yeah. And
Um,
right, there are museums, there are survivors, there is no shortage of physical verifiable evidence.
yeah. One of the kind of really interesting parts of this movie too are the parts, the scenes where they're showing either not officers or run-of-the-mill Nazis or German civilians. Like, and the camera, the documentary is capturing these people going on tours of the concentration camps, like within the days after the war, and seeing the varying reactions of people as
Hmm.
they walk into these places. Particularly, like at the beginning, you see like the Nazis who like ran the camps. They're like walking them through and saying like they're like pushing them into like a hut that's full of dead bodies and it stinks horribly. And then like the narration talks about how like the officers had like no emotion on their faces at all,
Hmm.
right? Like they knew what they were doing, right? I think this movie like confronts a lot of this idea of like how complicit
Yeah.
various people are.
Hmm.
So there's that scene with the officials who are like, it's very clear that you're like, from their lack of expression, they know what they're doing. They don't care.
Yeah.
Like they are evil,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, it also, like, the narration points out that, like, they tried to burn all the paperwork. So, like, they also knew that, like, it was bad and needed to be covered up. The narration also points out that, like, at one of them, there was, like, at a certain point of, like, however many people were killed, they held a celebration. And, like, that isn't there's none of that is shown. It's kind of mentioned offhand, but as right, and as, like, evidence of, like, that this wasn't done under duress. Like, the people in charge definitely knew what they were doing. Yeah.
But then like there were people who lived nearby who, you know, probably many of them supported the Nazis, but did not fully grapple with the
Right.
horrors.
It's one thing for people in your village to be, like, taken away and arrested and, like, that they're being sent somewhere or that they're probably dead. I think it's another thing to, like, be forced into a shack full of their corpses.
Yeah. I think that like one of the most stirring and interesting parts of this movie is when they take, I don't know, probably a couple thousand people from the nearby village next to
Mhm.
one of the concentration camps. And they're like, we're going to show, like, this is shortly after the war ended. And they're like, we're going to show you what the concentration camp looks like. And the camera catches these people, like, laughing and joking and having a good
Right,
time
on the
while
way
they're
there, they're all
on
kind
the,
of, like, cheerful and smiling.
and then and then they show them like, here's a lamp made out of human skin, and then they're like the emaciated like survivors who are
Yeah.
like missing limbs from disease. And you see the narration talks about this, and you see on their faces they just drop, and these
Yeah.
people become so like, oh my god, what have we done,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. You see their, like, souls leaving their bodies
Yeah,
almost.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of incredible, and it's also it felt like, you know, in a way, it's, like, sadistic to do this, but it's, like,
I
necessary,
don't
you know?
think, like, yeah, I don't know, like, I get it. Like, I think it was important to do that in the immediate aftermath to, like, force people to confront it.
Yeah, yeah.
And like, there is a lot of really interesting, just, like, very brief glimpses of people's faces that I think are they just say so much.
Mhm.
Like, I think there's a lot of footage of, like, the British and the American soldiers also. Like, there's one of just them, like, interviewing some of the guards, and you can just see on their faces the boiling rage they feel that, like,
Hmm.
I don't know, you can see just, like, the way that they're, like, looking around and, like, when they're, like, leading people, like, the civilians through, how much they're like, "No, you have to look at this."
Yeah.
It's a real watching this is a real sort of just, yeah, like, glimpse into, like, the depths of the worst of humanity, I
Yeah.
guess. But I mean, it's thankfully a rare thing to, like, to see, I guess. And I do think it is important to be able to have kind of be exposed to that in somewhat of a safe manner of, like, you're not living through it, but you're watching it, you're understanding the severity of it, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, In a way, I experienced that too because I have visited one of the concentration camps that's featured in this movie.
Mm.
I've been to the Dachau concentration camp outside of Munich, and it was one of the most like extreme experiences I've ever had in my life. You
Yeah, I'm
know,
sure. I've never been to one.
like you just step onto that ground and something feels
It
like
feels
fucked up.
haunted.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oof.
yeah, it's like we were taking the bus on the way there, and it's like, no, we're not joking right now. Like, we're visiting Germany, we're having a good time visiting Germany, but like today is the day that we're
Right.
not
Today is not
happy.
a fun day.
Yeah,
Did you see a Real Pain,
no,
the Jesse Eisenberg movie?
no,
It's very good. And like a big part of that movie is trying to kind of unpack and grapple with like that exact feeling of like we're on vacation, but this is supposed to be fun, but we're like going here to kind of not relive, but to sort of like uh I don't know, remember and to like understand like this horrific thing. It's very good. I highly recommend that movie
I'd like to see it.
because it is also very funny, and it is like there is a lot of that same like should we be joking now or not?
I see. Yeah. I think people have talked a lot about the Nazis, right? And so it's like it's kind of hard to like come up with something that hasn't been said, I guess. But
Yeah,
like watching this, it really does like inspire some just sort of general questions about the existence of the Nazis and all that kind of thing. Like, is there some kind of systemic thing that like allows people to become this sadistic, or are sadists just like drawn to becoming these kinds of people,
mm.
right?
I mean that's a big question, and yeah, that's like a lot to unpack. I think.
Because like something about the Nazis is that they were a system
Right.
of rather than like an instance of evil.
Yeah.
Whereas like you could go up in the ranks and be rewarded and go to parties and everything,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
based on these people whose whole premise was murder,
Yeah.
right?
I
Yeah,
mean, that's the. I think people are still trying to like grapple with that and like understand it and just
yeah,
be like, how, like, what leads this to happen?
yeah,
Because like, it shouldn't, it shouldn't be allowed.
yeah.
Hot take.
Definitely bigger questions than we have the scope for,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah. Like another thing I was thinking is like, especially as people were looking at it, it's like no one in the history of humanity had seen horrors like this before.
Right. Yeah. Like, it is kind of wild to think about. Like, nothing in medieval times was like on that scale or like that horrific. And like, right, because part of it is the kind of like the kind of mathematical
Yeah,
like clinicalness of it, whereas like a big battle in medieval times would just be like, yeah, there's probably limbs everywhere, but it's like somehow worse when it's like so it's not random, it's like very methodical.
yeah, yeah. It has you thinking about like who are Nazis, like what is going on in their minds,
Yeah.
and it's like
Yeah, it's still a thing that like people are still just like I've who knows.
yeah.
Like it's still I think a big question, and yeah, it's just like hard to kind of wrap your mind around.
I guess one other quick note that I had was like, there's a point where it's talking about a mass grave, and the narrator is saying, like, talking about them and saying, he says, profession unknown, nationality unknown, and like thinking about how it really like draws into view that like these are people, and in death they have become anonymized.
Hmm.
They were people, and they became human corpses in a mass grave. And it is part of that kind of like systematic violence that is
Yeah,
able to do something like that.
and it's also like a one more thing that is like extra horrific about it is that it's like removing someone's like personhood
Yes. Yeah.
in addition to their life, which is like yeah, just adding even more horror onto
Yeah.
it. But on that note, I mean, should we shift gears slightly from the
Nazis to Nazis.
yeah, exactly. That movie being, of course, Rome Open City.
Yes. By Roberto Rossellini,
Yeah.
aka was Isabella Rossellini's dad, I
Yeah.
believe. Yeah.
Go on to marry. what's her name?
Ingrid Bergman.
Ingrid Bergman.
Yeah.
Thank you. Only someone very famous. Yeah, and I think this movie is immediately very interesting in that it is an Italian movie made like in the immediate aftermath of World War II. That is, I mean, very thoroughly anti-fascist, and is very much kind of about
like resistance toward the occupying Nazis.
Yeah, but I there is like a lot in this movie of kind of picking apart like the like fascist mindset. I think also, which I appreciate about it. It was definitely a very sort of unintentionally uncomfortable watch in that it's like about a movie about living under fascism, made in 1945, and I'm just like, I wish this didn't remind me of the news as much.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, I was watching this movie thinking like, are we going to have to develop this level of grit in the near future?
I hope not, but it is like I'm watching that. I'm watching Andor again, and it's just like, oof, it is hitting me hard. Yeah, if you're a fan of the Star Wars TV show Andor, maybe give Rome Open City a watch. It's got a lot of similarities.
Yeah. This is, I mean, I think you kind of mentioned it, but like this is notable also for being our first Italian neo-realist film that we have
Very
covered.
true. Yeah, right at the start of
The
that as like a
inception of it,
movement. Yeah. Well, it makes sense because I mean, Italian film. I don't think we watched any Italian films made under Mussolini.
Not that I can think of.
But it makes sense to have this like immediate. I guess this happened a lot of places in the world, like the kind of post-war boom of filmmaking,
Right, and
sort
also
of-
like you think of Germany after World War One, right? With
Right.
like German expressionism as an expression of world
Yeah.
post-war troubles and
Yeah.
anxieties, and then the Italians kind of channel it into this like their own kind of grim and gritty like thing, less fantastical and more
kind of going the opposite
neo-realist.
direction. Yeah. Which also is interesting. I don't know what that like says about like the national character of each of those countries or whatever, but it and also like different times naturally.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I hadn't thought about it in those terms where it's like, yeah, all the post World War One German movies are like crazy expressionist fantasy things. And then yeah, the like Italian boom is like, what if we made everything way more real?
Yeah. It's different
and
ways of
gritty.
grappling with horrors, right?
Yeah. I think I'd heard of this movie before, but I wasn't that familiar with it. It does feel pretty influential on like, I think especially like how war movies, like it feels very modern compared to like any other World War II movie that we watched from the 40s.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that like Italian neorealism in general had like a pretty sizable impact on filmmaking.
It's interesting the way that because it was so influential, it's like this movie feels more contemporary than like other things made in the same time period.
I guess so. Yeah.
Just because it's like it's the use of film language now is taking from a lot of I think the same kind of places as this movie is. Like there's a lot more handheld camera stuff. There's a lot more location, right? It's all location stuff, like shot in Rome,
which
like,
I guess is typical of
just
Italian neorealist stuff.
Yeah. Also, just like seeing, I think this about a lot of movies, but like I just think European World War II movies always feel so different from American ones because it's like happening. They like the characters in this movie live in Rome.
Yeah,
and there are two separate, at times competing fascist armies that are like kind of fighting over it because it's like towards the end of the war, and so it's like the Germans are occupying Rome, but there's still a lot of Italian military there also. I think the movie doesn't go into that much detail about like what that situation is. I had to do a little bit of like extra reading up on it, just kind of like fully understand what the concept of an open city is, which I didn't know about, which is like a city that is occupied but undefended, like is sort of like, if you come invade this city, we won't fight you. I think to preserve, like in Rome's case, like to preserve Rome, like please don't bomb Rome. Like if you want to just invade, that's fine.
Wow.
Like just don't bomb us, please, because we have so many fountains here. I assume that it was mostly to preserve it as like a landmark
Yeah,
city,
yeah.
um, the seat of Catholicism and all of that
I mean, I guess
crap.
that, certainly is useful as far as the Nazis go, because we know that they had no trouble wiping out cultural, like,
Hmm.
institutions, right?
Yeah.
Americans too, if we're talking about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, like, or at least the A bomb, like, there were concerns about like wiping out culture
Hmm.
with those, and then they didn't really listen
Yeah.
to that.
Well, I mean, there's a sort of some inherent racism, I think, on America's part towards Japanese that there
No.
wasn't towards Europe. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, they the Allies destroyed a lot of cultural landmarks also.
Yeah, yeah. This movie is, I don't know if there's really a synopsis that we can give. It's really more. It's like a bunch of just kind of resistance people
Yeah.
engaging in resistance activities.
There is sort of an arc where it starts to kind of build in that them getting more organized and sort of like fighting back a little bit more against the occupying Nazis. And then there is definitely the third act of it is more of a descent where it's like, oh no, they're not actually like this movie doesn't necessarily end on a super positive note. I guess it is an overall. I feel like the overall messaging of this movie isn't pessimistic.
I mean, because this movie is made after World War II,
Right.
it is a
There's
movie that, like, you have an awareness that the Nazis are eventually going to lose,
yeah.
but spoilers, that doesn't stop all of the main characters from being slaughtered,
Yeah.
like
And tortured.
horrific,
Yeah.
tortured and slaughtered horrifically.
But it is like there is definitely a feeling in this movie that I did find very compelling that like even some of the Nazis are like, yeah, we're doomed. Like this has all been a huge like clusterfuck and we've just done all these horrific things in the name of nothing because we're gonna lose in like 6 months.
Right. I mean, yeah, and there, like, in particular, I think you're talking about, there's like a scene where there's a kind of drunk Nazi
Right.
officer
Who
who,
was a veteran of World War One also, so
yes,
he's this
is
guy
like
who's just like
defeated. Yeah.
he's this guy who's like so disillusioned and so over it all.
Yeah, you like talking about thinking about the interiority of Nazis, right? Like, this guy's like a decorated, high-ranking officer who's been in two of the world wars, and he like has no illusions about the idea that the thing that they're doing is wrong.
Hmm.
Like, he's basically like, yeah, of course, like, of course what we're doing is wrong. Like, how could you defend what we're doing? But
Yeah.
like, I'm here because it's my job, I guess. It's, yeah, that's very interesting. You talk about like the kind of the pessimism, optimism of this movie. One of the main characters is a Catholic priest,
Hmm.
and there are some like fun scenes with him,
Right.
like,
He has the most fun scene in the whole movie.
yeah. But like, there's like a part where it's like you're watching like a Catholic priest trying to, like, carrying around like a bomb and like a
Hmm.
machine gun, which is kind of an interesting image.
Another thing that I think is like really interesting about like World War II stories from Europe is that like yeah, that happened. That like
Right.
Catholic priests were just like, I guess I have to go bomb this place now. Like
Yeah.
that's the only way I can sort of like live with myself as like a good Christian.
Yeah, yeah. And like, I think it's because this guy, it's like there are points where he's basically saying like, I think it is the good Christian thing to do to fight you and kill you,
Yeah.
basically, like, to stop you from doing what you're doing. Like, my job is to help people, and like, yes, if there's somebody fighting against fascism, like, I will help them,
Hmm.
even if it means that people will die. He's the moral center of the movie, surely, but like, as a priest and as like a resistance fighter and everything. But and so it's really just drawing this contrast between like these Nazis who treat him like garbage and kill him, who are supposedly Christians, the
Hmm.
Nazis, and just like him just saying the correct right thing and then being executed for it. It's a powerful image, like, yeah, seeing like a firing squad, like, aiming straight
Right.
at a guy with a with a priest outfit on.
Yeah.
But
Well, and then like they don't want to shoot him.
right. yeah, some slight moral compunctions. But there's a part also where one of the main resistance fighters is being like brutally tortured.
Hmm.
And the priest like visits him, and the way that he's cut up, it's like a very like Christ-like imagery, right? Where
Mm, mm.
like he is a hero who is suffering for the good of the world, and then like he's like shown off into death by
Mm.
this this Catholic priest.
Well, the priest has a line where he says, "You wanted to destroy his soul, but you only destroyed his body,"
Hmm.
which is, yeah, that seems pretty apt in terms of what torturing someone to death tends to. Well, especially like, they're interrogating him, they're trying to find out where the other resistance members are, and he's not giving them up.
Right.
Which is always any sort of narrative about resistance movements. It's always like, oh god, like to be put in that position is like the most awful thing.
Yeah, yeah. There's another line where the priest is about to die, and he says like it's easier to die a good death
Yeah,
than
it's
to.
it says it's not hard to die a good death, it's hard to live a good life,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
I do think that is a very good quote.
Yeah, yeah,
That one really kind of stuck out, and I think that that does almost kind of feel like a bit of like a thesis statement for this whole movie.
yeah.
It's definitely got some heavy stuff on its mind, but I think it navigates it pretty well. Like I didn't find this movie to be like a huge bummer to sit through.
It's grim, but
Yeah.
it's not.
Like it's I think it's grim, and it for me anyway, it was scary just because of how kind of like timely it felt. But I think it does a good job of like also just being very watchable and
Yeah.
having a lot of like little victories kind of peppered throughout until it eventually, like, the the heroes do not. I mean, they achieve a moral victory, right? They don't give up the rest of the resistance, and like
Yes.
they die knowing that they have lived as good of a life as they could hope for.
Depicting heroism.
Yeah, but like quietly. It's not like, this is
Right.
not like a overly heroic movie, and it isn't like
Yeah.
music swelling
Yeah, it's not
before they're.
propagandistic. It
Yeah.
is it is just like earnestly looking at the glory of doing the right thing in the face of evil.
Hmm. But like I don't know, there's like a whole like kind of street urchin uprising that
Yeah.
I found really fun, and another just like kind of wild example of like, I don't know, resistance movements or like living under fascism is like all these like homeless children are now like bombing train yards.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
Um
like they are participating. They are
yeah, it's like, I mean, don't fuck with small Italian children. I could tell you that. Like don't mess with them.
vendetta, vendetta.
Yeah, they'll get you. As this movie is a good example of. That one, yeah, like sort of probably biggest moment of like levity in this movie is the priest goes to like he's going to like a secret meeting in an antique shop, and as he's waiting he sees two statues, one of a lady, one of a man, and they're both very kind of scantily clad,
Yeah.
and so he turns the lady around so the
So,
guy, it
so
doesn't
he
look like.
turns to lady. He's looking at them, and he's like, "I don't want to look at that naked lady because I'm a priest." So he
Yeah.
turns the lady around, and then realizes that he's made it so that the man statue is like staring right at her butt.
Yeah, so he turns the other statue around also. They're just facing away from each other. And that's like so kind of, that's not part of the plot. That doesn't lead to anything. It's just this little moment of this guy sort of like turning statues around.
It's
But
good
it
though.
is like is a good example of like levity kind of lightening the mood just enough to kind of keep you watching.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know, it's just like it tells you about this guy also, and kind of his very he has very clear morals, and
Hmm.
they're very kind of like church like, I guess. He's also, hiding money for the resistance.
Yeah.
The woman who like betrays the resistance for like a nice coat that like she doesn't even get in the end, and
Yeah.
it's like just because like that's definitely a thing that like really happened a lot. Maybe not a lot, but like there's definitely lots of true stories about that kind of thing happening. And it is like, you like sold out someone that you've like known for years and like supposedly are like in love with for a coat.
Yeah. And
And
then
it's just like so petty and so like, Ugh,
Not
yeah.
just like not a coat to stay warm, but like a fashion coat.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
And like you were there while I was watching the last couple bits of the movie, and there's that moment where like the Nazi, like the Nazi lady, like the person who sold them out, she like faints when she sees what she's done. She sees honestly some of the like the most graphic brutality that I've seen on this guy's body
Mm,
of any movie that we've seen so far in many ways. And so she sees it and she faints, and then the Nazi like is like, "I'll be taking that coat back,"
yeah,
and I'm like, "Oh, that is so cold."
yeah. Right, I get because this is an Italian movie, it's not there's no Hays Code, so, like, the definitely, like, the depictions of death and torture are a lot I think a lot kind of
Yeah,
more graphic,
you see those
and
like the flame that they're like sticking these like pliers into like
oh
the hot
god, yeah.
flame to
Ugh.
like rip out whatever.
Um, and then right, it's like a movie where, like, the bad guys kind of win at the end. I mean, it is, like right, it's kind of implicit that because it's made post-war that, like, well, they're gonna lose in, like, a couple of weeks after the end of this movie, but, like, it's still right, like, the Hays Code thing is one thing that I find so kind of limiting about that, and we'll probably talk about it more with some of the other movies, but, like, you can't have people, like, get away with crimes in Hays Code movies, which
Hmm.
is, like, so the ways that people get around it is sometimes really interesting, but it's, like, such a hard stance to be like, "No Coen Brothers movies can exist, like, under the Hays Code." Like, you can't have people succeed at you can't well, I think one of the big ones is, like, murder. You can't have someone murder someone and then not be, like, punished.
Yeah. Tell that to the people who only catch what however many percentage of murders.
Yeah. But so yeah, so it's nice to see a 1940s movie that is not Hays Code and is allowed to sort of grapple with some kind of more, heavy material, I guess.
Yeah, that movie's a bit of a bummer. But you know what's a bucket of sunshine? A movie about an alcoholic who ruins his
Mm.
life and
Yeah.
everyone else around him.
Uh,
Unless you had anything else on
no,
this.
I mean, I don't know, one thing that kind of stuck out to me, and I don't know if this is, purposeful to sort of portray the sort of waning days of the war and how much kind of disillusionment there was even amongst the Nazis, but I feel like all of the hiling in this movie feels very half-hearted.
That's
And I
interesting.
don't know
Yeah.
if that is a deliberate choice to kind of show, yeah, the like lack of morale, or if it's just because all the actors were like, World War II ended like 3 months ago. Like we're not putting our all into this hiling acting.
This kind of reminds me of that the Titanic movie that we talked about that was starring the person
Oh
who
god, yeah. Who was
starring the
on the Titanic?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, she survived the Titanic, and then we didn't get to see the movie because it's lost. But like they made a a movie about the Titanic that was released like 6 weeks after the Titanic happened, and they're just like. An actress was on the Titanic. We're going to take this obviously highly traumatized
Yeah.
person and put her on stage on
Oh
the screen
god,
right
yeah. So that was just it made me think about the like circumstances in which the movie was made. I guess kind of in a similar way to that. But yeah, Lost
The
Weekend,
Lost Weekend.
another bucket of sunshine about a not a guy who drinks, but a drunk, as he says.
Yeah.
And this is the Academy Award winner for 1945.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Like it's the pedigree is. I mean, it's co-written and directed by Billy Wilder,
Mhm.
who also did. We already watched Double Indemnity. I
Yeah.
think was that the only one of his that we've watched so far.
Yeah, but
I
also
mean,
famous for Sunset Boulevard, Some Like It Hot,
yeah,
a
like
bunch of other stuff.
considered like one of the best Hollywood directors of all time
Yeah.
for good reason. There was some like poll or some article or whatever that I think like amongst screenwriters he was like voted the best screenwriter of all time.
Hmm.
This is not my favorite of his works. I
Yeah.
think you can see a lot of the ways in which he is a really skilled filmmaker in this movie, but I don't know, I think there are a couple of things about this movie that really kind of don't really sink it, but just kind of keep it from feeling like transcendently good.
It's not even particularly
I
good.
mean, right? Yeah, I agree. It has good ideas that I don't necessarily know are followed through with in the best way. I guess.
Yeah.
I mean the quick plot synopsis.
Yes.
There is a guy named Don who is an alcoholic, and everyone around him knows that he's an alcoholic. And his brother, who he lives with, and his brother pays all his rent also, is like, all right, we're going to go away to the country for the weekend. We live in New York City, but we're going to go away to the country, and you're like on the mend. You're sober. Like, this is going to be good. I'm packing 5 shirts. And immediately Don is just like the most suspicious guy. He's like hiding a bottle outside of his window. He's like planning all these ways to like hide booze in his brother's luggage to like sneak away on the trip.
Yeah.
And so eventually, I mean, very quickly, his girlfriend and brother are like, hey, you're sneaking liquor, aren't you? You lied to us. Like, we're trying to trust you and you're not giving us any reason to. And he's like, I'm not even going to go on your stupid weekend. I'm going to go to the bar instead. And the movie is his weekend of, instead of going on a nice trip upstate, he goes on a bender and only succeeds in sort of like making his life fall apart further, to the point where he's going to shoot himself at the end, but is, saved by his girlfriend coming back and convincing him that life is worth living.
Yeah.
Which I think on its face is not a bad premise for a movie.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I was thinking while watching this is that I appreciated about it is that old movies are a lot more willing to be about one thing than new movies are.
Yeah.
Like this movie is just like let's focus entirely on like the experience of alcoholism and what's going on for him.
Yeah.
Like how he deals with these things, the way that his capturing his desperation.
Yeah.
It's just that I don't think that it ends up feeling that deep.
Yeah, it does feel fairly kind of surface levelly. I wish there was maybe a little bit, because there is like kind of a whole flashback structure within the movie of like showing how he met his girlfriend and like weeks or months leading up to the kind of events of the titular weekend. A thing that I really appreciate about this movie is that he's not like a violent or like particularly mean drunk. He's just like a mess.
Yeah.
And he's just embarrassing to be around, and like everyone's just
He's
like, good God, man, like pull yourself together. You know?
And he's out of control of himself. I think
Yeah.
that's like what it's depicting is like he can't, like he wants to fix himself, but he just can't.
I like the movie's like pretty clear stance that like this is not a moral failing on his part. This is a disease, and like the characters call that out. They're like, he's sick. This is a sickness. If he had like a physical ailment, you wouldn't treat him this way.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and so I appreciate that definitely about it. Because I think there are a lot of like anti-alcoholism movies from the silent era that are like so over the top, and like alcohol makes
the
you
demon
into like
absinthe.
Right. They're like, oh, you'll become a murderer if you like have a sip of absinthe. And
Well, that was in the kind of temperance times, specifically.
Like, this doesn't feel like a temperance movie. This feels like a legitimate movie trying to kind of like grapple with the effects of alcoholism and like. But I also think it doesn't. There's so little reason to root for this guy. I feel like because even when he is sober, he is a huge asshole to everyone. And I feel like maybe that is more realistic, that like he isn't, this like shining beacon of light when he's sober, and then he immediately becomes like a monster. Like that's boring and like not nuanced at all. But like I just feel like from the get-go, this guy is so kind of just like repulsive is a strong word, but he's not like Lionel.
No.
He's like he's not like even unlikable in like a compelling way. Like I just found him hard to root for, even in the sense of like I want to see him get better. I want to see him like have a victory.
Like part of
I'm just kind of like, fuck this guy. He's such a jerk.
Part of the thing, like representing his better life that he could have. It's like Don the drunk versus Don the writer, right? And like he's like working. He wants to write a great novel or whatever, and he's like, he drop out of school or quit? He quit his job or something like that because he's like, I'm gonna write a book, and then he doesn't. And I look at him and I'm like, I highly doubt your book would be any good. You know?
You don't want to read The Bottle?
Yeah, it's like so blunt. He's like, I'm gonna write the great novel examining alcoholism, and it's going to be called The Bottle, and it's going to be about my life. And I'm like, yeah, it's not. I don't think it's going to be very good.
Yeah, I don't know. I do feel like this movie starts with him already in such a like rough place, and people
Yeah.
are already so kind of like against him. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like a movie. I didn't think about this while watching it, but like kind of a similar type of character is like Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems, where you're like, I don't necessarily
Oh
love this dude, and he's
yeah.
making a series of bad decisions the whole time.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's like this quality about that character where you're like, I can't help but root for this jerk.
Yeah.
And I feel like the character of Don in this movie is like not he isn't a compelling jerk. He's just like a sad, like gross dude, kind of.
Yeah. I think also, like, while I was watching this, I was thinking, like, there are a lot of things that could work about this movie that I think just slightly don't.
Mm.
Like,
Right. That's kind of my whole feeling about it. It's like, oh, it's like this feels like it is like a couple degrees off from being really good.
right, like, it could be really good, and it's not it's not even something specific that they just did wrong. It's just, like, make the movie better. But
Hmm.
I think that one thing that, like, really got in the way for me is that the acting feels so stagey. It feels
Yeah.
so theatrical, and in, like, a kind of close-up character study, it just feels fake. And so I, like, did not I felt like if the acting were more naturalistic, I
Hmm.
might have been able to, like, get on board with the emotionality of the
Yeah.
story better. But, like, I felt like the style of acting really kept me at a
Yeah.
distance with
It's
this one.
real like strong 1940s like over the top stuff. But also
Well,
right,
it
it's
feels like a play. It feels like
right.
the acting
Yeah.
feels like it is for a giant
Yeah.
stage,
Yeah. Very
instead of
much
like
so.
a close-up character study,
Yeah. Right, so it's like same screenplay with different actors. I wonder if it would have worked better. I
I
don't
mean,
know.
it still has problems.
Sure, yeah. I think there is a lot to talk about in this movie, but I don't know how much of it is like fun to, to listen to. I don't know. I took a lot of notes during this movie, which I guess, I mean, for me is usually a sign I didn't like it very much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I do think there's some interesting things going on in it, even if I didn't like it that much. Like
Mhm.
there's a lot of theremin in the soundtrack, which feels notable.
How did I not notice that?
That like one just because I feel like the theremin isn't a super common instrument in film scores at this point, but also I associate it so much with science fiction movies,
Yeah.
and this is like a very like dark look at alcoholism, and it's like it's like got this like wacky theremin soundtrack, right? It's like it's not bad, but it is like I don't know if that was the right choice for this,
Mhm.
you know.
Once again, the
Um,
Academy consistently making the wrong choice.
of course, yeah, always. There's a character who talks a lot in like abbreviated slang, which
Don't be ridic.
don't be ridic, but also says natch for short for naturally, which I don't think this is the like first instance of that, but it's definitely I did not realize that natch was like a 1940s thing, I guess.
Mhm.
Because I looked it up afterwards. I was like, is this like where that comes from? And it's not, but it's like around the same time people started saying natch.
Natch.
Yeah. I don't know. That felt notable to me.
There's some weirdly for a movie from 1945, some weirdly conspicuous anti-Semitism in this movie.
Is there where
What,
I
like, so there's a point where he is like trying to get the last possible money to like get like just a little bit more alcohol, and so he's just trying to pawn anything that he can, and he's walking around to like every single pawn store in New York City, and they're all closed,
oh right,
and
because of
he's just like, he finally finds someone. He's like, why are all the pawn shops closed? And it's just like, we're all Jewish. It's Yom Kippur. And it's like, okay, like, did you need to put that in the
I don't know, I
movie?
guess that didn't strike me as anti-Semitic, but I guess there's an argument that it could be.
I don't know. I like every pawn shop being like, or more or less every pawn shop being owned by like observant Jews feels a little pointed, you know?
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. That does remind me. That's probably like maybe the most notable thing about this movie is it is, as far as I can tell, the origin of the character walks towards camera as street signs sort of fade in and out
Oh,
behind
yeah,
them,
yeah.
as in particular to show them on a drunken bender,
Mhm.
which is like 100% a thing that I learned about from The
The
Simpsons.
Simpsons, yeah.
Like, I think Homer does that at least 4 or 5 times on that show, of like in various instances where it's like walking towards camera and there's like usually neon signs. They're more
Mhm.
like street signs in this movie. But I went off on like a whole rabbit hole, like looking up, like, is that where this comes from? And
Uh-huh.
I as far as anyone can tell, it seems like it is. This is like the origin of that as a like visual trope.
Yeah. Huh.
Um,
There are some, like, kind of nice style touches in this movie. It's
yeah, yeah.
occasional, but,
I mean,
but yeah.
it's still a Billy Wilder movie. It's still like very competently made.
I think, like, one, like, really subtle little thing is, like, it's showing time passing while he's at the bar, and it shows
Hmm.
that by, like, showing how many, like, little
Yeah,
rings of, like,
yeah.
of liquid are from his shot glasses or
Yeah,
on the
which
counter.
he refers to as his vicious cycles, I think, or his vicious circles. That's what it is. There's also just a moment where he's trying to pickpocket someone's purse at like kind of a slightly fancier like cocktail bar, because he needs money to pay for more liquor. And they catch him in the act. They're like, "Hey, you stole this purse," and he's like, "You got me." And then the person playing the piano starts playing a song going, "Somebody stole a purse," and everyone starts joining in, and that's just such a great like 1940s thing that they immediately start improvising a song called "Somebody Stole a Purse." So like everyone else at the bar is like having a party, and he's forced out because he's a thief.
There's one scene in this movie that I think is very cool. I was kind of like, there's a lot of this movie that I'm just like, okay, after school special, rolling my eyes, that kind of thing.
There was
But
kind of a
there's one scene that gets pretty surreal.
is it the bat scene?
Yes.
Yeah.
um, and I was very glad for it in the movie because basically, like, there's a point where he's sort of checked into like a ward of some type, and then
Yeah, well,
he is like
it's
detoxing,
the
basically.
drunk ward at Bellevue Hospital in New
Yeah.
York, which I apparently they filmed in the real drunk ward of the hospital,
Hmm.
and that was like I had never been done before, and I think was then I don't know if because of this movie like was not allowed again for like decades.
Oh, really?
So it was like a pretty I guess like unique or rare kind of glimpse into like what an actual one of these like drunk wards looks like,
Yeah, and
and just letting people dry out and hallucinate.
they established like the sort of things that you'll see as you're hallucinating from withdrawal, and it's like,
It's never big stuff. It's never pink elephants. It's
yeah,
small things. It's bugs. It's mice. It's like
yeah.
little things that creep up on you.
Yeah, and you just see like so many people just like screaming at things that don't exist.
Yeah.
But then, like, yeah, there's a scene where it happens to him. He's in his apartment,
Yeah. Well,
and
he escapes the drunk ward first. He
yes,
has this whole like escape scene,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is like that is a very like tense, good scene of him like sneaking out of the hospital.
But yeah, no, he starts seeing like creatures crawling out of his walls,
Yeah.
like a bat eating a mouse.
Right. Well, because he sees like the mouse in the wall and then a bat flying around, and the bat flies to the wall and eats the mouse, and there's like blood dripping out of the wall, and it's
Yeah,
really
it's like
intense.
sick, nice.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I said. The character is like, is just starts screaming.
Yeah, no,
But
it is. That's a part where I really did like his acting, where he's just screaming at like the
right.
horror in front of
Yeah.
him.
Well, it's an instance where it's like him being really big fits the scene.
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to shout out Bim, the very catty nurse at the drunk ward, which is I think a thing this movie does pretty well is like all of the side characters that he meets all feel like people.
Hmm.
Like there's no reason why the nurse at the drunk ward needs to be like an interesting character, but he is.
Hmm.
And so just like or like the bartender or like some of the other like bar patrons that are there when he's like at the bar at 7 a.m. Um that I do think that stuck out to me as like all of the kind of not the extras, but like the kind of smaller side characters all feel really well realized, and
Yeah.
like they each have real character to them.
Speaking of the kind of
They're all super well cast. It's really just the lead actor who kind of
yeah,
feels maybe a little miscast.
you think a lot about while watching this movie of the bartender himself,
Hmm.
because
He is enabling this guy's alcoholism, but he's like does not feel good about it.
right, yeah, they're like he wants this guy to. He doesn't like that he's taking advantage of him and like getting out credit for drinks all the time, but he also like wants to treat him like a human being who is suffering. But
Hmm.
also he's just like, if you ask for a drink, I'm gonna pour it. I'm a
Yeah,
bartender.
there is kind of a lot in this movie of like how much leash do you give someone who's
Yeah,
clearly struggling?
yeah,
Like how much do you kind of respect their autonomy, and how much do you be like, no, man, I'm cutting you off. Like
right.
you're a mess.
And like what different people in different roles in your life, like
Yeah,
what responsibility they may have,
right. Because
does your regular bartender have a like different style
yeah,
of responsibility than your girlfriend or your brother?
yeah. And the brother like very immediately is like, I'm dealing with this for decades. Like I'm not
Yeah,
holding his hand anymore. Like I'm going upstate to the country. Like fuck this.
yeah,
And it's like it's hard to argue with him because clearly like they live together, and it's like it's been something he's been dealing with, like being responsible for his alcoholic brother for a long time. So it is like it feels kind of cruel in the moment, but it's I don't know. I was also like, yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with him.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, I do think there's good stuff in this movie, but overall I wasn't that crazy about it.
yeah.
Last Weekend is directed by Billy Wilder, who also directed Double Indemnity.
Okay.
And Double Indemnity was based on a book by James M. Cain, who also wrote a different book called Mildred Pierce.
Oh, look at that! You walked us over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mildred Pierce, famous movie.
Yeah. I knew nothing about this movie going in,
Yeah,
which
me
was
neither.
which was great.
I had read like a short synopsis, and it said a woman is trying to raise her daughters during the Depression, and I'm like, okay, sure. And that does not communicate what this movie actually is very well at all.
No, yeah. I think I get the sense in my small amount of reading on it that's like more like what the book is about, and the movie
Mhm.
is sort of like juiced up with some Hollywood drama.
It's got that Hollywood juice for sure.
Yeah. Notably, there is not a murder mystery in the book, and that is like entirely what this movie is structured around. So,
Yeah, this movie begins in medias res with a man falling to the ground, shot, and he goes Mildred, and
a
then
mystery.
we have this whole framing device of her telling her life story to some cops.
Hmm. Yeah. Also, just like what a way to open a movie where there's like murder and shadows on the wall, and it's like all dramatic. She tries to jump into the ocean, and then a
Yeah,
very 1940s cop, as there tend to be in these movies, says, "Hang on, I wrote down the line because it was really good.
yeah,
Um,
I have it
just
written down too.
just because you want to bump yourself off, I gotta get pneumonia." 'Cause he's like, "You jump in there, I'm gonna have to jump in after you."
It's quite an interesting way to stop somebody from killing themselves. It's just
Be
like,
like, "This is really inconvenient for me if you
yeah,
kill yourself right now."
yeah. She's like hanging on the railing, and he just takes his nightstick and it's like ting 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 on the railing. It's like, hey, lady, go home. He doesn't make sure she's safe. He's just like, not today. Go home.
He's just like, "Get out of here. I don't have the time."
But yeah, so this movie is not exactly about a woman raising her daughters during the Depression. Is more or less like the main thing of the movie is a woman has an extremely narcissistic, evil daughter who compels her to do all of this stuff, including become rich and create a business empire. Partially, she does it to provide for her family, but then she does it to cater to her increasingly awful daughter's increasingly expensive tastes.
Yeah, I had progressive notes while watching this movie of like how bad the daughter is just as a person. Vida is her name, Veda, which I didn't get the spelling. I thought it was Vita,
TA. Yeah.
but there's a birthday cake which spells it out. Yeah, she's a nightmare. She's just like a real nightmare person.
Yeah, yeah, and they draw this into comparison very much because she has a younger daughter,
Hmm.
and
A,
that
a
younger
cool
daughter
daughter.
is yeah, she's got cool daughter, bad daughter is this
Yeah.
movie. Um, yeah, and the younger daughter is so cute and so good, and then of course tragedy strikes, and Mildred almost like after losing one of her kids becomes almost like obsessed with like serving the other one.
Hmm.
She's still acting like a real person. It's just she's desperate to help her kid. And so, like, but she has like an awareness of how horrible her kid is becoming. And she's just like, I know, but like, what am I going to do? Like, say goodbye to my only kid who's left? It's, it's a tough situation. This movie is just like, there's a lot of people going through rough stuff in this movie for sure.
Yeah, yeah, but not like it never feels. I mean, this is a very 1940s movie, so there is some melodrama to be had. But I feel like it's I don't know. It doesn't feel as kind of over the top. It certainly doesn't feel as over the top as Lost Weekend.
No, no. Yeah, it is more. I mean, it's entertaining. It's not like grueling like some
Mm.
some other kind of like movies about the human misery. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, and like you were kind of touching on before, like this movie is like really stylish and it has like a really good pace to it. And I think we can credit that to Michael Curtiz.
Yeah, good director. Hot take. Also, I think this is the first Joan Crawford movie that we're talking about on the show, I think.
Yeah, and this is her comeback movie.
Pretty good in this movie, I would say,
Yeah.
Joan Crawford.
No. Yeah, she's great in this movie. And like she fought hard for this role.
Mhm.
Michael Curtiz didn't originally want her, and also she was one of the stars listed as box office poison with with these
It is crazy
horrific
that there was, like,
magazines.
an actual list of actors that they were just like, "No, we hate them."
Yeah, it was like a trade magazine for like movie theaters, and they're just like, don't make movies with these people. They don't sell. Like we're taking out a whole page saying like saying screw you specifically.
Yeah. Yikes. So much of this movie's kind of success or failure, I think, rests with her because she's just in pretty much every scene.
Yeah.
And she gets a lot to do. Like, there's a lot like, I feel like this is a really, I mean, probably because it's based on a novel. I don't know, it feels like a very fully formed character.
Yeah, yeah, a rich character. I think that there
Yeah.
was some criticism at the time that this came out that she was like one dimensional, that like in her efforts to please her daughter, she kind of like isn't like a person anymore. But I really disagree. I think that she's like a really interesting, fleshed out character. Yeah, and of course, yeah, Joan Crawford like really sells it.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of the other characters in this movie can feel kind of one note at times, including
That
Vida, the
is true.
daughter.
Yeah. The daughter and then like the kind of rich suitor.
Yeah.
He's just a bit of a like stock rich asshole guy.
Yeah, I feel like Mildred never does. And I guess one of my takes on this movie, that I do not really think was intentional, especially reading about the story as presented in the book, is since this is I would consider this to be a film noir movie, even if it doesn't fit all of the criteria. And it starts with like a murder and like a mysterious woman fleeing the scene and
There's shadows.
being glamorous and mysterious, and it's starting with this very kind of like stock noir kind of setup of a femme fatale, and then flashing back and showing you like all of this backstory and all this interiority of that person, and
Hmm.
they no longer feel like the same character once we're sort of caught up to that point again in the movie.
That's true. Yeah, it brings like such a new context to those original scenes.
Yeah. And I think that is a really cool, interesting, like, I don't know, it's not really a deconstruction of like noir or like the femme fatale archetype, but it's like there's enough of that that I think it makes it stand out as like a really interesting noir movie because it is like taking what could appear in the first scene as a stock character and like revealing all of these layers
Yeah.
and kind of
Particularly
like,
because
yeah.
in those moments where, in those recontextualized moments where you think that she is this femme fatale, you end up finding out that what she's doing is kind of like a selfless act of
Hmm.
heroism, quote unquote, or like, I don't know, abuse victim of her own daughter in another way. But like she's trying to do something good in all of those actions. And yeah, it's just, oh, Vita. It's
It
just
is really, really terrible.
so detestable.
I think it's like it does kind of it speaks to how terrible that she is that I don't know, like I guess besides spoilers, besides the murder, she doesn't do anything that's really particularly like a crime, I guess. It's just that she's just
It's just the
mean to
way
everyone
she
all the
is.
time and is like so
Yeah.
entitled
And
and it's just
shallow.
like
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, really like it is amazing how like detestable uh Vita is as a character despite kind of just acting like a child for most of it.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think that it's helped a lot because there is there's a lot of kind of back and forth of like who wants to be with who in this movie. One of the suitors for Mildred is this fading empire sort of like rich son who has never worked a day in his life. There's a lot of stuff in this movie about like whether you're working, if you're a
Mhm.
worker, or if you're like a someone who sits back and is rich. And but like a lot of Vita's behavior is enabled by this also horrible in his own way.
Mhm.
Mildred, you see like Mildred fall for him for a second, and then she kind of gets her sense, and she's just, yeah, like, never mind. Like, I'm just using him for his money. I'm just using him for his beach house. Like, this guy is clearly horrible, and yet, like, she was with him enough time for Vita to kind of get involved, and they play off each other badly.
Mhm. I had read that like the book is like very really leaning into the idea that like it takes place during the depression and it is like mostly about that and there's like lots of reference to it whereas the movie doesn't make I guess as much of a direct reference to the depression or like the stock market crash or anything but it does talk a lot about yeah like people having money and having lost it and times being hard I guess.
Yeah, economic hardship. Yeah.
And yeah, one of the things that is like particularly, I think, really unlikable about Vita is that she's like so contemptuous of the idea of like working at all. Like when her mom
Yeah.
gets a job as a at a restaurant.
She's like horrifically embarrassed.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, she's like that's like the most like offensive thing.
like I can't look at you in the eyes anymore because,
Yeah, it's like how shameful that you work at a restaurant. Like
and
this
yet
is,
like
you
this,
know.
yeah, in this movie, but then this movie is also kind of like depicting, the American dream, quote unquote, right? Like she's like,
Yeah.
I can't find a job, and then she like, it goes to a cafe and then sits down, and she's like, well, the waitress says, "What do you want?" And she says, "A job." And then she works her way to the top, baby, and then starts her own restaurant chain of called Mildred's. And yeah, I also appreciate how like this is like a low key like food service industry movie. And it's
Yeah.
interesting seeing like the food service industry stuff in this movie. People
Mm.
saying like don't don't enter or leave the kitchen with an empty tray. Like that's something that people still say. Like always pick up glasses or be serving something.
Mhm.
Always be serving. There's a great line of like someone serving. It's like, I'm anxious, and they like, no, it's the don't be anxious. It's rough on dishes.
That is a very good line.
It's got Butterfly McQueen in it once again as the. I mean, I'm sure she's a very nice person, but I just can't stand her voice.
There is, yeah. I mean, she sounds like a cartoon, which is a little bit goes a long way, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard this movie mentioned as like an influence on Steven Spielberg or any of his works, but I feel
Hmm.
like I got really strong Spielberg vibes from it.
How so?
He has definitely, I think there has been sort of like, he's definitely mentioned Curtiz as an influence. But I mean, I don't know, it has this sort of like Californian
Yeah.
suburban life stuff going on, which it sort of reminds me of Spielberg. It's a divorce movie. That's kind of the big one.
Oh, true.
The like depiction of a like household kind of mid divorce, I think, reminds me a lot of especially like early Spielberg stuff.
Hmm.
The younger daughter who dies reminded me of Gertie, Drew Barrymore's character in E.T.
Also reminded me of the kid in Meet Me in St. Louis too.
Oh yeah, a little bit, a little bit. I'm curious now if like this has ever been kind of like brought up as like one of Spielberg's kind of early influences or not, because it there I can definitely
Interesting.
see like how it could have uh influenced his stuff, but maybe I'm just projecting. Who's to say?
I think those are legitimate points for sure. That's interesting. I guess the final image of this movie, I thought it's hard for you to know what to make of it.
Hmm.
It's like a very
Yeah.
constructed final image. I mean, it's hard to, without getting into all the machinations of the plot, like talk about like everything that like it is happening. But like
Hmm.
basically, Vita has been arrested. Mildred is kind of free almost from her evil daughter and is reconnecting with her ex-husband, who are both kind of commiserating about their evil daughter. and and then the movie is sort of ending, and it's this very like kind of visually constructed shot where they're like walking out of the police station into the light. But what I found sort of notable is that they walk right past some people scrubbing the floor below them. And like
Hmm.
I'm not sure if there's some supposed to be some sort of like weird irony of it's like these like they're walking above and past these people, and like this movie is so concerned with like who like the value of like working hard and jobs that like are thankless and that kind of thing,
Hmm.
and then it just
Hmm.
like breezes by these people in a way that it's like it's hard for me to know exactly how it works. uh
Yeah. I mean, that went over my head. That is a really interesting point about, yeah, like, because that is the last shot feels very, because it is so kind of constructed. It's like it's very deliberate.
yeah.
It wasn't like, it does not feel like that's a sort of like, you know, incidental detail. Um.
Yeah, there are
So
three characters. There's like there are three things in that shot. It's like the
yeah.
characters, the door, and those people scrubbing the floor. And it's
Yeah.
like it's I mean, you could say that they're like, I don't know, cleaning something, like something has been cleaned.
Mm.
As far as crime has paid, the crime has been defeated or whatever. But
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's a tricky. It's a weird image to invoke, like right at the last second, and not directly comment on.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I fully grasp like everything I think this movie is maybe like trying to impart or trying to say about the American dream or like the value of work and like wealth stuff. There's a lot of that in there though, and I think it is. I think it's at least bringing up interesting kind of questions, and especially about
Yeah,
like parenthood. How do you be a good parent to a, a awful child?
yeah. I don't think I don't know if the movie. I think the movie has probably an uncomplicated view of the American dream, an earnest view of the American dream,
Hmm.
but it has a
Yeah.
very complicated view of like relationships and being a parent. Definitely, yeah.
Mm. It is kind of interesting. I think we talked about this a little bit in the Mr. Smith Goes to Washington discussion. of how many of these like 1940s directors are like they love the American dream so much, and it's usually because they are European immigrants who like were fleeing something, either like
Mm,
poverty or
yeah.
like oppression or whatever it was going on in Europe, and they come to the US and they're like, I want to make pictures, and then they make it big in pictures, and so they're all like, yay, American dream, it rocks, let's make movies about that.
The American dream rocks.
Yeah.
Well, this movie it has like a very, an in medias res beginning that like
Hmm.
it ends up like, being mysterious, and then the rest of the movie kind of fills it in and recontextualizes it, and in a good use of that mechanism. And our last movie is another one of those.
Mm.
Just Brief Encounter.
A lot of non-linear storytelling this
True.
year.
Yeah, very much. A lot of Nazis and a lot of nonlinear
Yeah,
storytelling.
the two big trends of 1945.
Nonlinear Nazis.
Yeah, Brief Encounter. What a picture.
Yeah. This is honestly incredible. This is like one of the. This is probably one of the best movies I've ever seen. To be honest, like
Yeah,
it's
I mean, I don't know. I've seen a lot of movies. It is very good.
yeah, it's up there.
Um,
It's up there.
yeah, it's up there. Yeah,
I think that like more than many movies we've watched lately, I'm like this is pretty. Like there's something special about this movie, something a little
yeah, yeah.
transcendent about this movie.
This movie does sort of. It feels like it's bottling something very, very kind of powerful,
Mm.
which is also, I think, one of the strengths of this movie. It's funny because of how emotional this movie gets. I think is in part due to how restrained it is. Also, like
Yeah.
this is like very much the
It,
flip side of The Lost Weekend, which is like attempting to tell this very powerful story, and it's just like hammering it into the audience like too much.
yeah.
And I feel like Brief Encounter is like so understated, and that makes it all the more like
Like heart wrenching.
emotionally devastating. Yeah.
Yeah. Like this is a movie. I think you bring that up. Like this is a movie that is all about the kind of interplay between restraint and letting your emotions
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, very much. This is the first David Lean movie that we're talking about. Not his
Mhm.
first movie, but won't be the last one. And a brief plot synopsis, I guess, is that well, it opens right with man and woman sitting at a table, and then one of the woman's friends sees her and like comes over and like is trying to make conversation, and they're like, "Oh no, like we were just saying goodbye," and so they sort of leave, and then the woman is sort of thinking about it and flashes back to having met this guy who just left. And the movie is the story of them having a mostly emotional affair over the course of a couple of weeks
Yeah.
before it then returns to that same scene at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once again, kind of like recontextualizing it, and it is so like it is so like frustrating watching it the second time, especially. It is like oh, it is like I want to pull my hair out.
It's like shut up, shut up, shut up.
I know, yeah, because it's like right, it's that scene at the beginning is their sort of like final goodbye. They've had this like incredibly emotionally charged, like very very strong uh romantic relationship that is defined by it being restrained and kind of bottled,
Mhm.
and this is like their final goodbye. They're like, we're gonna not gonna see each other ever again after this, and then like this woman just comes in, it's like "Bah, bah, bah, how are you bah," and it's just like ruins their like heartfelt goodbye, and it is
Yeah.
yeah.
It like something like that. I think it's so interesting, right? It's like it's a movie that it would be this kind of thing where it is like just really leaning all the way into these big emotions.
David leaning.
David, yeah. And what is it doing with like just cutting it short, right? It's like it's like you're getting ready to feel these feelings and then something like mundane gets in the way.
Hmm.
It's in a way it's like deromanticizing a little. Well, I don't know if that's true. I feel like I had a thought about that, but I lost it. But anyway, yeah.
Mm. But I think like I don't know my biggest takeaway from this movie is how much the like restraint and the bottledness of it like just makes it feel so much more like intense. Like this is
Yeah.
such a like quiet, very British movie. Also, that everyone's like, oh dear, I cannot possibly speak what is in my heart. And like, I think the movie is somewhat kind of critical of that like British instinct to kind of like keep your emotions in,
Yeah.
because it is like we see how much I don't know. Another thing that I think is really good about this movie is that it's like you definitely, I as an audience member, like I want to see these two people like be happy and find some way of like ending up together or something like that. But it is like
Yeah.
they're both married, not unhappily. Like they both have like pretty good marriages that are maybe
Yeah.
like a little bit boring is like the worst you could
Mhm.
say about them. But I like how it's like when they show Laura, the main character's husband, I think his name's Fred. He's just like
There's nothing
he's
wrong with
fine. Yeah, he's just
Yeah.
like a normal dude. He's very nice. He's like they
It
get
would be
along really well. There's like no it seems like there's no, ill feelings that either of them have towards each other.
it would be so convenient and it would be so easy for them to
Mhm.
make him a bad person, right? But,
Mhm.
like, having him be a decent guy who she just is not like, didn't even realize until she was head over heels for somebody that she wasn't head over heels for him, right? It makes it so much more complex. Like,
Yeah.
and that's the thing with this movie. It is like one of the most like emotionally complex movies I've ever seen.
Mm.
Like what is like all of the dynamics that are going on in people and the decisions that they're making. It's like there's a lot of factors and like like fighting like feelings and like
Yeah.
going on in each person, but it's all kind of like hitting on similar themes with each person. It's like how they react to this, like, do you follow your feelings? But like following your feelings is kind of wrong, but is it wrong to like hurt yourself to not follow your
Mm.
feelings? But
Mm.
like, is
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is it wrong to like, and then you flip it over again? It's like, is it worth it to follow my feelings and like blow up everything around me, like for to only be happy? But how wrong is it to like just live not my best life just because I ended up in the wrong circumstances? And like, it's
Yeah.
yeah, there's so much going on in this.
And there's like there's no like right answer to any of that, right? It's
Yeah,
all none of it's easy. It
yeah,
all feels very kind of messy in the way that life so often can. Well, um
yeah. It's a lot of ambivalence.
yeah, and it's just like the subtleties of it where it feels like every little like moment and glance feels really impactful because it's so kind
Yeah.
of like charged but also like very very downplayed.
Charged is the word, yeah. Like there is a and with those characters, there's a charge between them, you know?
Yeah. And like it takes a long time for them to it takes a very long time for them to admit they have like specifically romantic feelings for each other. But
Yeah.
also just like it's like we see their sort of their they meet each other, right? Like he's a doctor, Alec is the guy. And they meet when he like pulls a piece of like dirt out of her eye at the train
Mhm.
station. Which is already like a very intimate way to meet someone is that they're like touching
Yeah.
your eyeball.
Yeah.
And it's like they kind of by happenstance kind of keep running into each other like at the train station or like in town and things like that. And it's like it starts off as just like this very friendly, like, oh, like this is just this person that I know that I like ran into randomly. But it's like they have so much chemistry that it's like, I mean, you know where the movie's going to some degree. Right. But it's like I like how long it takes for them to kind of like admit it to each other and to themselves. I almost kind of wish the movie stretch that out even more because I like that. I feel like that's kind of
Mhm.
my favorite stuff. Is like they're like, oh, these just like kiss already.
Yeah, yeah. Along those lines, as it's like teasing into like what their life could be together, it does something which I'm realizing now is was pretty much a direct reference from La La Land, which is that, but in a different direction, where it's like she has like an incredible like fantasy sequence where she's staring off through a window and she is imagining what their life could be together, and it's just like that end scene of La La Land, but it's like filled with hope, but also dread, rather than like
Mm,
wistful, like wistful what ifness in La La Land. And I just love any of those like kind of fantasy scenes,
right. Yeah.
where it just goes off into like a non-literal black space and people are frolicking around. I love that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, same. Yeah. Also, like this movie does have a lot of dread in it for being ostensibly like a romantic movie.
Yeah.
I mean, especially towards the end when Laura almost throws herself in front of the train. That scene really stuck out to me of just like the way that scene is shot and directed and cut together is like really, really effective. It's doing things that are not like the most cutting edge in the 1940s, but I do feel like they kind of stand out of like, oh, they're like trying stuff. Especially like when you can kind of see like the gears turning in Laura's head as she's like contemplating jumping in front of the train. And the
Mhm.
camera is like slowly tilting to the side into a Dutch angle. And it's like, it's such a great way of just, it's like visually showing the sort of like shift in her thoughts, I guess.
Yeah, and there's like a lot of like
Great sound design
internal
too.
monologue in this movie. Yeah, with the
Hmm.
sound design. Like there's a lot of internal monologue in this movie, and I think it's like used really well in these moments where like you're in Laura's mind like the entire time in this movie. And like the movie follows her attention as well, where like when things are just like when she's kind of drifting away into fantasy, like there's something that she's not really paying attention to, like the film itself like loses focus along with her,
Mm.
and then like the sound kind of fades out, and then it goes into her monologue, or her internal monologue. And I found that to be like so effective. Like there are there isn't a way that people do like portray thoughts in movies, and it's usually with like a slightly echoey version while the person is like sitting and thinking like
The
along with the
classic.
words. But like we haven't seen that done much. Like it's not, it doesn't seem like it's that common
Mm.
exactly right now. I think we've seen it done before, but like I think it's done very gracefully here. I think like it's integrated really well into what's going on in
Mm.
the story, or in the moment.
Um,
Um,
it is interesting how many of these, like the last couple of years of movies that we watched, have been kind of flashback narratives. Like they have a framing scene in the beginning, and then it's right. It'll flash back and show sort of how we got here, and that's
yeah,
usually the thing motivating the narration. Either in this case, it is just like her own thoughts, thinking back about like the previous weeks and sort of like how this relationship has developed. Right in Mildred Pierce, it's like it's the police interrogation. In the
it's
Lost
like double
Weekend, I think
indemnity.
Double Indemnity, he's like talking into the dictaphone. Lost Weekend, he's talking to the bartender. They all have some sort of like voiceover narration going on in them, but it's all motivated. None of it's just like, and now there's just voiceover.
Yeah, I that was so shocking to me. Like I had kind of always thought that it's just like, oh, the way this works is that you know the person is telling the story to the character is telling the story to the audience with voiceover.
Hmm.
But like all so many of these movies, it's like, no, we need to have a justification for why
Yeah,
there is voiceover.
we haven't reached. You might be wondering how I got this situation.
Right. Like, yeah, yeah. Like, it's almost, I forget if I made this, I forget if I said this like with the last episode or earlier or
Hmm.
whatever, but like, it reminds me of like when close ups were being used in early movies and they
Right.
felt like they needed to justify the existence of a close up.
It's like
because
it
it
has
was
to be
just
someone
like,
looking through like a telescope or
yeah,
something.
'cause it was like this formal technique that was breaking the kind of like continuation of reality as they like understood it through the lens of a camera. And
Yeah, yeah.
and so like, something like like a close up is not exactly something that you can do with a human eye or a camera like naturally. And if you're looking at the screen as just like a window, like you wouldn't change sizes of things. And yet, and so like to ease their way into it, they needed like a diegetic reason, just like the kind of
Mm,
artifice of a voiceover. Like they need somebody narrating it to something. They need to show someone narrating it in the movie.
right. Or like early animation, they have to be like, this is pictures that someone drew, and there's a lot of them. That's how it
Yeah,
works.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that is like I hadn't really thought about it like that. And that is probably like right, movies now just have narration in them all the time for whatever like just with no justification whatsoever.
Yeah.
And there is like an element to like as I guess like film literacy not necessarily improves, but just like it like there's all these sort of techniques and sort of like storytelling devices that sort of become commonplace and people don't even think about them anymore. And yeah, I guess that is probably just naturally what happened with like voiceover. But I like voiceover being contextualized and motivated. I don't know. I think
Yeah.
it adds something to it of like why are we hearing this narration happening?
Record scratch.
Yeah, right. But then it's like we don't see they're not playing a record. Maybe they should. Deadpool should. We should always see him in the sound booth at the end because he
Oh,
knows he's
that's
in a
true.
movie
Yeah.
scene.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Another kind of like film language technique, which felt fairly modern in a way, was like when her friend is like yammering on in the beginning, and like she's just like, oh, she says, I wish you'd stop talking. And she's saying like all she also says, isn't it awful about people trying to be kind? But with this scene where like it's putting you in her annoyance, it does like an extreme close up on this person's mouth, like talking and
Hmm.
just like blabbing on. And it feels like something that a modern movie would do, of just like, this person's talking so much, like we're going to emphasize this by just zooming in on their lips, just blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. This movie shows like subjectivity really well. Like it really
Yes.
does a good job of like putting you into Laura's head and like her mindset and how she's feeling. I mean, how she's feeling is really the main one because it's like she's pretty miserable throughout the whole movie, unfortunately.
Yeah, she's tortured. Definitely.
Tortured, yeah, is probably a better word. Because right, they're
Sure.
like most of Act Two is like really pleasant because that's like when her and Alec are spending the most time together and are actually able to
Yeah.
kind of like feel like they're mutually kind of getting something out of their affair.
Yeah.
I also like how this movie is not at all like it doesn't feel judgmental towards either of them. Like it feels very much like this is kind of what both of these people like needed in their life in this moment a
Hmm.
little bit.
Yeah.
While also being like both of them definitely feel a strong kind of like moral guilt around it also.
Yeah. I think like that whole like dynamic, like it's really summed up in this part where Alex says to her, I love you so very much. And then she responds with, I want to die, which is like, what a moment. What a moment.
That sums up this movie so well.
She's tortured. She's tortured by how much she loves him and what a horrible situation it puts her in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like there's also just like so many like really well observed, like nuanced portraits of existence. I
Hmm.
like I
Yeah,
think
for sure.
with that scene in particular, like there's that scene in the beginning what we keep talking about with like her friend like just destroying this moment, right? Like that feels very real. It feels very
Yeah.
possible. But then like there's like danger lurking over every part of happiness, right? There's like, what if we're found out? Is this
Mm.
okay? All this kind of thing. And like, there are all these things that feel kind of true to life in that, like, there's like maybe a moment where like you cross a line just like a little bit, you dip your toe over a line, and then something bad happens. Like, this happens a couple times in the movie where it's like she dips her toe just a little over the line, and then something kind of unrelated bad happens, and she takes it as like a warning. It's like
Yeah.
a cosmic like
Yeah.
punishment or warning for what she's done. And it's like that kind of like interpreting things around you, I feel like, is such like a natural way of existing in a way, you know.
Hmm. Well, and especially like right that the like that opening scene that is then revisited later is like that's such. I mean, I think yeah, even at this point, that could be such a sort of like cliche like movie moment of like the the forbidden lovers have to say goodbye to each other, and it's like this big emotional tearful scene, and the movie denies the characters that and the audience that's like, no, there's this shitty friend who doesn't know anything about what's going on. It's going to come in and start yapping
Read
and
the room, lady.
ruin this whole moment. And so they just have this like the tiniest little like he like puts his hand on her shoulder and then
Yeah.
leaves, and
Oh,
it's like ah
yeah, this is a movie about like unfulfillment, right? And like
yeah.
when that happens, like their fulfillment of their teary goodbye is not fulfilled.
Mm, yeah,
There
great.
there's like a lot of there's like so much stuff in the script that is just like constantly like referring back to itself and like enriching itself. And like there's a
Mm.
couple of like other kind of little side things in the movie, like there's like a movie that they go to that's called Flames of Passion. uh,
Oh yeah.
like
I love a film within a film.
yeah, and they spend a lot of time in this like convenience store cafe thing in the train station, and like there's like all of these like kind of background contrasting relationships happening with like these side
Mm, mhm.
characters in the train station that like kind of comment on the central relationship in the movie.
I really want to read. This is based on a play by Noel Coward that I think is set entirely in the like the train station cafe.
Mhm.
That I'd really like to read because it is like I think it's a much sort of since it's all in the train station, it's kind of much more contained, I guess, than the movie is. And I'm curious how like this evolved from that play to the movie because it also just is like such a great setup for a movie. I think I
Yeah.
initially when I first heard about this movie, I think I'd probably heard of it, and then I maybe about a year ago I was at Nighthawk Trivia. Shout out to Nighthawk Trivia. And they showed a clip from it that I think was one of the points where they're like not for the final time, but they're like saying goodbye at the train, like as the train is pulling away. That classic sort of like it does have one of those scenes in it of like the train is pulling away and I'm like, no, I have
Yeah.
more to say.
Yeah.
And they showed us like a little clip of one of those scenes. And I was like, holy shit, what is this movie? Like, I need to see this. Just because it was like it was one scene that felt so again charged of just like it was, I don't know, like a minute, 2 minutes of the movie, and I was like, whoa, like this really like hit me. And I think the when I initially sat down to watch it, I thought it took place over like one night, or it was like a much kind of
Mm.
like smaller scale movie. And so I'm like I don't think the play is one night either, but I do love stories like that where it's like whatever ships passing in the night, whatever. They're just like there's like they didn't have long, but but the time they had was lived to its fullest. Like I don't know. There's something very compelling in that kind of setup to me.
Yeah.
And I think this movie takes that sort of like that feeling, whatever that sort of like mixture of like frustration and gratitude and hope and despair. It's like cramming it all into this like pretty small box and just letting it
Yeah.
all stew into a lovely soup. A lovely warm, very English soup.
What's the most English soup?
I
They
don't
have
know,
notable soups.
like a beef stew, something like
Oh, yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, that's true. A beef stew.
Yeah.
Incredible movie. Incredible.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else on this?
I mean, I think this is the earliest David Lean movie that I've seen, and it is like I've seen his like big '60s like Lords of Arabia, Bridge on River Kwai, those movies that are like so big in scale and so like masterfully directed. And I think this is a like much smaller scale movie, and it still feels so well directed. It feels like so
Mhm.
confident and sort of precise, and all of the adjectives that are used to describe good direction in movies. So it's, I guess, sort of like watching the Kurosawa movie, where it's like, oh yeah, there was like these guys had a good handle on how to make movies early. Although this is like not that early for Dave. I think David Lean had already directed a good bunch of pictures at this point.
He'd done 3 before.
Okay.
One of them was Blithe Spirit, which is a comedy by from a Noel Coward script that came out the same year.
Good collaboration, I guess. I would like to watch Blithe Spirit at some point, but I guess we figured 2 David Lean, Noel Coward movies in one episode was too much.
Yeah, I saw Blithe Spirit some number of years ago at the Nitrate Picture Show, and I remember enjoying it a good amount.
Cool.
Yeah.
Which was better, this or Blithe Spirit?
This was better.
It's a high watermark.
Yeah.
High bar is set by this movie.
Yeah. Very good. Very, very good.
That transitions nicely into favorites of the year, which we have already recorded.
So, what was your favorite, Glenn?
I
Let's
think
say it together. 1, 2, 3. Brief
Brief Encounter,
encounter.
yeah.
We can say things easily at the same time because we're in the same room right now.
True.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. Brief encounter.
I mean, clearly the best movie.
It's
Clearly, I also really liked Mildred Pierce.
yes.
But yeah, Brief Encounter. I mean, we've talked about it at this point. Good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, a pretty clear favorite, I think.
It's just so good.
Yeah.
And it's like so.
Yeah. Go watch it. Highly recommend.
But yeah, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Follow us on platforms.
Are we a platform? We're still on Instagram, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I think technically we're still on Twitter, but like I don't think either of us have opened that in many months.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Get off Twitter.
Yeah.
Should we make a bluesky.social?
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, sure. But yeah, I mean, we post things on Instagram usually.
Yeah, Instagram's the spot. Meta, we love Meta.
Ugh, I don't, but sure. I don't want to put that out in the world.
Thanks for listening. Appreciate y'all. Good to see you in person, Glenn.
Yeah, great to have an in-person episode.
Yeah, that'll do it for this one. So,
all right,
Glenn.
See you next year.
The stars can change in their courses, the universe go up in flames, and the world crash around us, but there'll always be Donald Duck.
I do love him so. His dreadful energy and his blind, frustrated raging.